Welcome back, deep divers. Ready for another plunge into the depths of horror and imagination.
Always up for a good scare, especially when it comes with some thought-provoking themes.
Well, this time you've handed us a stack of excerpts from Stephen King's Cell, and let me tell you, folks, this one's a doozy. We're talking full-blown, tech-fueled apocalypse.
Oh yeah, Cell definitely taps into some primal fears we have about technology, our dependence on it, and how quickly it could turn against us. It's like King took something we consider completely ordinary, like cell phones, and twisted it into this source of instant, brutal horror.
Chillingly simple, right? A mysterious pulse transmitted through cell phones instantly turns users into violent, zombie-like creatures. But what's interesting is how he takes the whole zombie trope and flips it on its head.
Absolutely. No slow, shambling undead here. The transformation is immediate, brutal, and King doesn't shy away from the gruesome details, like that opening scene in Boston, for instance.
Oh man, the power suit woman and those pixie girls. Talk about a horrifying introduction to this world.
The way they transform, it's graphic and disturbing, and it sets the stage for the utter chaos that the Pulse unleashes. I mean, eat her death of the poodle.
Yeah, that's definitely a moment that sticks with you. Jeez. Right from the start, King throws you into this world of violence and uncertainty, and right in the thick of it is our main character, Clay Riddell. He's an artist, thankfully without a cell phone, desperately trying to reunite with his wife, Sharon, and son, Johnny, who may have been exposed.
You know, it's interesting that you pointed out Clay being an artist. It's a subtle detail, but I think it highlights this contrast between creativity and this destructive force that's sweeping the world. Clay's journey becomes this fight for survival, but also this fight for preserving his own humanity in a world that's rapidly losing its own.
It definitely adds another layer to his character. And his search leads him to Tom McCourt, who brings some much needed humor to the story. Yeah. And, well, some unsettling encounters, too. I mean, the naked man carrying a child's body.
Yeah, that was disturbing, to say the least.
And then there's Mr. Riccardi at the hotel, who's completely barricaded himself inside, refusing to open the door, even with the danger outside.
I think those early encounters really established the immediate breakdown of society caused by the Pulse. It's not just about people turning into these phone crazies, but the fear and paranoia that grip those who remain unaffected. Mr. Riccardi choosing isolation over any kind of potential aid. It highlights the loss of trust that now defines this world.
Yeah, it's a powerful statement about the psychological impact of this event. And as Clay, Tom, and Alice, a young girl they rescue along the way, journey through this chaotic landscape, they start to observe patterns in these phone crazies, or phasers as they call them.
Phasers, I like that. It's a more, well, a more clinical term for these creatures, right? Less emotionally charged.
Yeah, maybe. But it doesn't make them any less terrifying. They're drawn to technology, particularly sounds, and seem to go through these cycles of flocking, foraging, and then this eerie stillness. What did you find particularly unsettling about these patterns?
Well, first off, I think King uses those terms very deliberately. Flocking, for example, hints at this loss of individuality, this kind of herd mentality that's taking over. Foraging suggests this primal instinct driving their actions.
And the stillness, those periods of rebooting, as they call it.
Right, exactly. It raises the question, are these creatures simply mindless, driven purely by instinct? Or is there something more sinister at play? Is something else controlling them?
And that's where this idea of a group mind emerges, which is, well, it's truly chilling. We're not just talking about individual transformation here, but this potential hive mind controlling these phasers, making them more organized, maybe even intelligent as the story progresses.
Yeah, the scene at the Gayton Academy soccer field really drives that point home, remember? The way the phasers flock to the sound of music, falling into this synchronized trance. It's both mesmerizing and terrifying, hinting at this evolution beyond just mindless violence.
And their decision to burn the flock there, talk about a morally complex moment.
Absolutely. They're faced with this growing, potentially unstoppable force, and they choose this drastic, violent solution. It highlights the desperate choices people are forced to make in this new world, and it definitely blurs the line between survival and savagery.
And it raises that question, are they simply reacting to a threat? Or are they succumbing to the same primal impulses they see in the phasers?
A slippery slope for sure. And as they make their way to Koshwak, this rumored safe haven in Maine, they encounter Headmaster Ardai, who offers some interesting, shall we say, insights into the nature of the Pulse.
Okay, what are your thoughts on his theories? Because I gotta say, that guy was intense.
Oh, he was definitely a fascinating character, almost Shakespearean in his delivery, right? But his theory that the pulse taps into these primal, destructive parts of the human brain, well, it's unsettling because it suggests that this horror isn't external. It's an amplification of something already within us.
So basically, we're all capable of this kind of darkness.
Well, that's the implication. And when you combine that with his belief that the rebooting phases are actually reprogramming periods, making the phasers more powerful and dangerous, it adds a whole new layer of complexity to this idea of a group mind.
And a lot more to worry about.
Right. It makes you wonder what's really happening during those quiet periods, what's being built, what's being planned, while the world holds its breath. And if we consider Clay being an artist, well, it adds this chilling layer. What if the pulse is targeting creativity, replacing it with something darker?
It's a terrifying thought.
And this is where King really digs into this potential for technology to not just destroy, but to manipulate and control us on a fundamental level.
And the deeper they go, the more evidence they find supporting this idea of an evolving, possibly controlled force at work, like the checkpoints they learn about where people are forced to use cell phones, essentially creating more phasers. And then there's the Raggedy Man.
Yeah, don't even get me started on the Raggedy Man. He's creepy, but also fascinating.
Right. Definitely. He's like this more evolved phaser, acting as an emissary for the group mind, and Clay's disturbing ability to speak through him. What are your thoughts on the Raggedy Man?
He's this chilling embodiment of the duality of the phasers, right? Both victims and perpetrators, driven by this force they can't control. But his existence and Clay's connection to him suggests there's a deeper, more complex relationship between the affected and the unaffected than we initially thought.
And then there's that devastating revelation about Johnny. The note Clay finds that confirms his son has become a phaser, but there's that heartbreaking twist. Johnny was trying to find him. They were both searching for each other, but the pulse tragically kept them apart.
That's where the real horror of Cell lies, I think. It's not just the violence of the transformation, it's the loss of connection, the fracturing of relationships that the pulse causes. And it sets up this brutal dilemma for Clay. Does he continue towards this uncertain haven with his companions, or does he try to save his son, knowing that the boy he knew might be gone? You know, it's interesting how Clay's journey back into phaser territory is such a stark contrast to his initial flight from Boston. He's not just running from the chaos anymore.
It's almost like he's seeking it out now.
Yeah, he's making a conscious choice to confront this terrifying new reality head on, driven by something deeper than just survival.
Well, he is armed with a cell phone, the very symbol of this apocalypse, and a cryptic phone number. I mean, talk about irony, right?
Right. It really highlights that complex relationship between technology and humanity that King explores in Cell. It's both a weapon and the potential solution.
And this journey back isn't just about reaching Johnny. It's almost like Clay is confronting his own fears, the potential darkness within himself.
Like we were talking about earlier with Headmaster Arday's theory, that the pulse taps into this primal, destructive part of the human brain. So Clay's decision to use a cell phone, it could be seen as him embracing that very darkness to fight for his son.
Wow, that's a thought-provoking way to look at it. It's not just a rescue mission, it's a descent into the heart of the very force that shattered their world.
And the landscape he's traveling through definitely reflects that. The descriptions of the Northern Counties Expo, where he had that terrifying encounter with the Raggedy Man, are chilling.
Oh yeah, it was once this bustling fairground, now just a silent graveyard littered with the remnants of humanity. A stark reminder of the pulse's devastating impact.
And yet, amidst this desolation, we see glimmers of resilience, like the group of survivors Clay encounters. Their story is brutal, highlighting the escalating violence of this new world.
But they're still fighting back, carving out some semblance of order amidst the chaos. It says something about the human spirit, right?
Definitely. And that encounter they had with the Raggedy Man, who seems to be orchestrating these checkpoints, adds another layer of mystery to his character. He's clearly more than just a mindless drone.
There's purpose, intelligence behind his actions.
Right. And his presence at these checkpoints, it makes you wonder, is this Mads conversion a form of population control? Is the pulse intentionally shaping the world, weeding out those who are susceptible?
That idea of intentional manipulation definitely ties back to what we were discussing earlier, about the pulse being more than just a destructive force. It might be a tool, a means to an end that we don't fully grasp yet.
And that uncertainty, that sense of an unknown force shaping events, it's what makes Cell so unsettling. We as readers are constantly trying to make sense of the chaos, just like Clay, looking for patterns, for explanations, for some glimmer of understanding in a world that's rapidly losing its logic.
And just when you think it can't get any worse, there's that checkpoint scene, that image of people being forced to use cell phones, basically being turned into phasers against their will. It's just gut-wrenching.
It's a scene that speaks to the ultimate horror of the pulse, the loss of free will. These people are being stripped of their humanity, their individuality, transformed into tools for some unknown purpose.
And for Clay, witnessing that, it's like a horrifying preview of what might have happened to Johnny. He's watching his worst fears play out right before his eyes.
Absolutely. It's a pivotal moment for him. It underscores the urgency of his mission. He's not just trying to save his son, he's trying to reclaim a piece of the world that's been stolen.
His determination is definitely unwavering. But as they continue north, the phasers' evading abilities become even more terrifying. Dan, one of the survivors they meet, even describes seeing them levitate.
That detail, while seemingly fantastical, actually deepens the horror. It suggests that the pulse isn't bound by the laws of physics as we understand them. It's a force operating outside our comprehension, which makes it even more unpredictable and dangerous.
And all that unpredictability comes into sharp focus when Clay finally finds Johnny. But it's not the reunion he was hoping for. His son is hiding under a cot, nonverbal, almost feral.
It's heart-wrenching, because it really shows the true cost of the pulse. It's not just physical transformation. It's the erosion of the mind, the loss of the person they once were.
And that's where Jordan's theory about the worm, the need for a counter-program, comes into play. Clay has to believe that somewhere beneath that phaser programming, a spark of his son still remains.
And his only weapon is that cryptic phone number, a lifeline in the sea of digital darkness.
He dials it, hoping to disrupt the pulse, to somehow awaken Johnny's buried consciousness. And what happens next is unlike anything we've seen so far.
The descriptions of the counterpulse are intense, this wave of chaotic energy that shakes the very foundation of their reality. Buildings tremble, lights flicker, and the phasers are thrown into disarray. It's like the pulse itself is fighting back, trying to maintain its grip on this world it's created.
In the midst of all that chaos, all that swirling energy and disoriented phasers, Johnny stirs. He makes eye contact with Clay and utters a single word. Die.
It's a flicker of recognition, a spark of the boy he once was breaking through the fog of that phaser programming, a moment of hope amidst all the despair, a testament to the enduring power of love in the face of overwhelming darkness.
But the fight's not over. The phasers, although weakened, are still a threat. And Clay has to make a choice. Stay and try to help Johnny recover, or flee while they still have a chance.
It's a decision no parent should ever have to make. But with the phasers closing in, he knows staying would mean certain death for both of them.
He chooses to flee, leaving his son behind. Heartbreaking, but born out of necessity. And as they escape into the snowy wilderness, we're left with this haunting image of Johnny, standing alone amidst the ruins of the expo, his fate uncertain.
It's such a powerful image. It really encapsulates those central themes of Cell: the fragility of human connection, the devastating impact of technology gone awry, and the enduring tower of love, even in the face of unimaginable loss.
We've journeyed with Clay through so much chaos, witnessed the collapse of society, confronted the terrifying possibilities of this technology-controlled world. But as we move into the final part of our deep dive, one question lingers. What does this ending, this uncertain fate, tell us about the true nature of humanity? Man, that image of Johnny just standing there alone in those ruins, it's hard to shake.
Yeah, it's powerful stuff. Really drives home the stakes, the human cost of this whole tech-fueled nightmare. And it's not an ending that offers easy answers or resolutions, is it?
Definitely not. It's unsettling because, in a way, it forces us to confront the reality that sometimes, even when facing unimaginable loss, there are no clear victories. Like, survival itself takes on a whole new meaning.
Right. It makes you think what really matters when everything's been turned upside down. Is it about holding on to hope, clinging to the remnants of the past, or is it about adapting, finding new ways to connect and rebuild, even if the world's forever changed?
And Clay's decision to leave Johnny behind, to flee with the other survivors, it speaks to that struggle, doesn't it?
Absolutely. On one hand, it's a heartbreaking act of surrender, acknowledging that he might have lost his son to the pulse. But at the same time, you could see it as this act of pragmatism.
Like he's recognizing that staying would mean certain death for both of them.
Exactly. He's choosing a path that offers at least a chance for survival, for rebuilding, even if it means living with that grief and uncertainty.
It's a tough choice, no matter how you look at it.
No doubt. And that idea of rebuilding, finding new ways to connect, it's at the heart of those final chapters, isn't it?
Yeah. As Clay and the remaining survivors make their way through this shattered landscape, they're facing more than just the external threat of the phasers. It's like there's this internal struggle to hold on to their humanity, too.
Right. They're constantly being tested. Like in that scene where they encounter a group of people who've basically reverted to a primitive, almost tribal existence.
Oh, yeah, the ones who've abandoned technology completely, choosing to live in harmony with nature instead.
Yeah. It makes you wonder, is technology inherently bad? Or is it how we use it, how we allow it to shape our lives that leads to these kinds of disastrous consequences?
It's a good question and a timely one. I mean, even outside of this fictional world, we're grappling with those same questions.
Absolutely. King isn't necessarily advocating for a complete rejection of technology, but he's definitely highlighting the dangers of becoming too reliant, too dependent on it. What we might lose, what parts of ourselves we sacrifice for the sake of constant connection, instant gratification.
And it's not just individual choices either. It's the systems, the structures that shape our relationship with technology, like those checkpoints in cell, forcing people to use cell phones, becoming phasers. It's a chilling example of how technology can be used to control and manipulate entire societies.
A cautionary tale, for sure. And one that resonates even more strongly today with all this talk about surveillance and data harvesting and, well,
Yeah, it makes you think. So, where does all this leave us? What's the final takeaway from this deep dive into Cell?
honestly, I think it's a story that throws some hard truths back at us about ourselves, about our
Yeah.
relationship with technology, and yeah, even the potential for darkness that we all carry.
Those monsters we fear, they aren't always out there, right? Sometimes they're born from our own choices, our own creations.
Exactly. And in a world where technology is becoming more and more dominant, that line between human and machine, between control and chaos, it gets blurrier every day.
So, what do we do? Where do we go from here?
I don't know that Cell gives us concrete answers, but it definitely leaves us with a lot to think about. That ending, the ambiguity, the lingering questions. It's almost like King's challenging us to continue the conversation.
Yeah, it's like he's saying, okay, here's this horrifying possibility. What are you going to do about it?
And that might be the most powerful message of all,
Hmm.
you know, the power of stories to make us think, to question, to confront those dark possibilities, and maybe, hopefully, seek out the glimmers of hope that still remain.
Well said. And on that note, I want to thank you all for joining us for this deep dive into Stephen King's Cell. We hope you've enjoyed it and maybe come away with some food for thought about humanity, technology, and the choices we make in this increasingly complex world. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and hey, maybe put your phone down for a little while. You never know what might be lurking on the other end of that call.